which is implied, really.
But doesn't exist.
It's not in paper, but it represents the thinking of the people at the time, and still all the people that believe in having a government also still think that they need a government in order to have their rights protected. So you can do that where I agree that even though I don't agree with the exact legislation that's being passed in this area, say defense spending, I would prefer less defense spending, but I have agreed to cede that decision to majority rule. You can make that kind of contract, and that's totally legitimate, and you can delegate that to the government, and essentially that's what, in my view, happened when there was a constitutional convention.
Right, but I would ask, though, then, there exists, though, no factual evidence of a contractual relationship with government, right? So the contract doesn't exist.
But no, it's not, as I said before, every society is based on certain implied principles. They're implied, they're written in the contract. Fortunately for the United States, our founding fathers attempted to put it in writing, which is much better than for it just to be totally implied. But what was obvious to everyone, and not so obvious now to some, like yourself, who's an anarchist, is that you needed a government to protect your individual rights. And so that there wasn't any disagreement about that. There was disagreement about how much power the government should have, should it be limited, in what way, etc. So on that count, there was agreement, even though it wasn't in a signed document. In fact, there's nobody that I know that was arguing at the Constitutional Convention or in the streets that they didn't want to have any government at all.
But they did it in secret in Philadelphia, right? Aside from everyone else. And then they redid the whole entire Constitution and rewrote the whole thing in secret and made it stronger.
They did meet in secret, and, but that's that because they wanted to. They were involved in negotiations, and they brought them back to the states, and they got ratified, if I recall correctly. But the main point here, from the perspective of the anarchists, is there was a view that was unanimous that you needed a government.
There's no factual evidence to support that. I would say it's unanimous between those people, though, in that group.
No, not in those people. I mean, the people there's nobody opposed that there should be any government.
It was only for a tiny minority of people who are land owning, not for everyone else, like the women or children who cannot participate.
There were some. The Constitution wasn't a perfect document, and all it did was identify the fact that the proper function of the government should be to respect the individual rights and protect the individual rights of the citizens. And so,
all right, so that
right, but that was the fundamental perspective.
Okay, yeah, and I understand like the history of it and these ideals, and what you're saying would be correct, and what the document was attempting to outline, and the people.
And so this is the way it is with political freedom and progress. What happened in the Constitution was that a large class of citizens were granted the protection of their individual rights. Like you said, the men, the women weren't included because culturally they...
A lot of men also were not included.
Well, if they were slaves, they weren't included.
Like property owning people, like in Britain, suffrage was not included to all men, just a small
Right. So, but the point that I'm trying to make is this, that once you introduce the principle that in this class of citizens, your individual rights should be respected, then it's only a matter of reasoning to say, well, this person's a human being also, so they should be granted the protection of their individual rights. And this woman is also a human being, and therefore she should also be granted the same
protection you're trying to say.
The same protection of her individual rights. And that's how you expand. If you want to go back even farther, before the Founding Fathers, the Roman Republic, certain groups, a large segment of the population had rights, and that's where John Locke gets his idea, I think. And that's why you have a republic, which means the public part, which means there's a private part, which means government hands off my private part. We can do elections and we can decide things regarding the public part, in other words, the proper function of government. And so that's a matter of expanding the basic principle to apply to all the other people to whom it logically should apply.
Okay. In terms of citizenship, like you're trying to say, you're explaining that.
By the
you're
way,
giving
are we
a-
going to miss our
no,
interview?
No, we're going to wrap this up real quick. Two more questions. In
No,
terms of citizens,
we've done a lot more than 2 or 3 questions.
last thing
But
is,
let me say this.
one
I'm
last
going to
one
let
is-
you. I'm going to
okay,
let you
okay,
ask
okay.
more questions.
Okay,
I'm not
sorry.
going to cut you off. But